Okay, welcome back to Planning Board Meeting Land. It's time for some preliminary matters. Could I get a motion on adoption of the resolutions that are on the agenda? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take the first one, Washington Science Center Parcel M site plan, separately because I think we have one member who's not eligible to vote. So let's start with that one. Could I get a motion on Washington Science Center Parcel M site plan?
I move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? And I think
One
one abstention?
Yeah, I abstain.
Very good. Moving on for the other resolutions to be adopted. Could I get a motion on those?
I move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. The minutes, again, we have a couple of members who are not participating, so I'm going to do them separately. From July 21st.
Move for approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry Sushi, aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? And that's one abstention with Carol. The minutes of July 28th.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? And I believe
I'm abstaining.
one abstention. Very good. Other preliminary matters. We have a corrected resolution for Montgomery Industrial Park site plan. Could I get a motion on that?
Go ahead.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Jerry Sushi, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I believe there will be one abstention.
I am abstaining.
Okay, thank you for that. The corrected resolution for North Bethesda Parcel H site plan.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? That's approved unanimously. Could I get a motion to approve the record plats?
Move approval.
And I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? Those are approved unanimously. The regulatory extension requests, these are all public hearings, but nobody has signed up to speak on them, so we could consider them as a group. Could I get a motion to approve the regulatory extension requests?
Move approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Jerry Sushi, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved unanimously, and that brings us to Park Director's report.
Could I, Jerry Sushi, make one comment? I'd like to thank everybody for their well wishes. And I noticed you're signing a frame. I just asked that my name, Jerry Sushi, be printed in there, so I'm not available to sign that. But that's for our retiring council.
Very good. We're glad to see that you are up and at it, Jerry.
I'm in a couple of therapy for my knee, therapy for my bypass surgery, and then I'm not supposed to be driving, and I have been sitting in the back of the car because of the airbag potential hitting me. So I appreciate it. I'm trying to stay in touch with everyone, and I thank you again for all your well wishes.
Very good. We wish you all the best, and we all benefit from a little therapy of one kind or another.
And Jerry, are you keeping the car seat backwards?
No, I'm sitting in the back, and my wife is my chauffeur at the moment. So I'm enjoying that.
Outstanding. All right, Mike Riley is ready.
Good morning, Mike Riley, Director of Parks. I'll definitely start with wishing Commissioner Sishi well on behalf of the entire Parks Department. I'm glad to see you up and about and looking good. Is that a park shirt?
Thank you very much.
Is that a park shirt you have on, Commissioner? I can't see the logo, but it looked like a park shirt to me.
I'm very proud to wear that, and I do wear that out in public.
Thank you so much. So my park director's report this morning, I'm going to cover three things. I'm going to talk to you about some fall events. Fall is our busiest time of year for doing fun and exciting things in the parks. I'm going to talk to you just about our volunteer program a little bit, and then talk to you about something the board asked I come back and talk to you about, which is pedestrian and bike access to the Brookside Gardens Garden of Light show. So let me start with can we get my PowerPoint up, please? It's on the computer over here. So if you go to our website, the first thing you see at montgomeryparks.org is special events and festivals. This is just a small smattering of what's going on this fall, and I just want to touch on each of these. I'll start out by complimenting our marketing and graphics teams for being so talented to come up with these types of logos. But let me just touch base on each of these a little bit so you know what they are. I had the privilege, like I do every year, of kicking off the Urban Tree Summit that's organized by our Horticultural, Forestry, and Environmental Education Division each year. It is a split between virtual and on-site sessions. I'll just tell you a little bit. I want to just run through the names of the topics of some of the virtual session on the first day, September 7th, so you get a flavor of some of the topics. Why nature and the internet go hand in hand was one. Tiny forest, reconnecting city dwellers to nature. Large tree transplant process. Boosting tree immunity for disease control. Reforestation, sustainability, and empowerment in Armenia. And that's, we bring in experts from around the country and around the world to talk about this specialty, and the importance of tree health, particularly in cities, is increasingly important for sustainability. So I am very proud and want to recognize the Huffy staff who organized this. Switching more to our public park activation events. Acoustic and Ales, you're familiar with. This is where we bring in bands, food trucks, and beer trucks to various locations. Next event is September 9th in Germantown Town Center Urban Park, October 15th at North Four Corners Park and Silver Spring, and then November 5th at Elm Street Urban Park. And our attendance at these ranges anywhere from 200 to 400 people typically, which we're very thrilled about. Salsa Night, September 15th in Long Branch. I believe it is Long Branch Arliss. Long Branch Arliss Park. As you know, our PROS plan that you just adopted has 3 themes in it: active, urban, and social. It's priorities for our parks. And something like Salsa Night obviously hits all 3: active, urban, and social and social. Something new, the Ale Trail. This is at Lake Needwood on September 24th. That you're going to get to hike. And then at the midway point, you'll get to have a refreshment. And then I believe at the start and finish, we have our beer garden. So you get to get both your exercise and your beer, and it's all good. Sunday Serenade is our concert series on Sunday mornings in Cabin John, a little-known amphitheater in Cabin John Park that was built long before I came to the Parks Department, that had not been highly used, but it's a natural amphitheater. Fall elixirs and mixers. We have a craft cocktail series that's very popular for a small fee. Experts show you how to make very...
When you say the amphitheater, Cabin John, are you talking about that area that's like around a fire pit, under some trees, and it's just on flat ground?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I've been there, but it's been decades.
I actually just kind of stumbled on that recently as I was riding my bike through on the trail, and I thought it was really curious because we have the fire pit there. And I mean, I assume somebody's like established that it's safe to have a fire there, but it's just very unusual to have any kind of fire pit. And it has sort of a crude, sort of semicircular, I assume that's what you mean when you're talking about the amphitheater.
No, actually, Chairman, it's in the parking lot where the large playground is. On the opposite side of that parking lot, there's actually a built-up stage with, full power and sound and everything there, which is a full amphitheater.
Different thing.
Yes, different.
Okay, interesting. And speaking of which, Liz Brent, who's here, was asking me about whether or not we had the Porky Pig trash receptacle, right?
Oh, it is there. It is
Which
still...
I said it was gone, but apparently it's still there.
No, it is still there. It is legendary.
Yeah.
When I did my kids' back-to-school career day, which I just showed slides of the parks, I was, the most popular parent of the day. But when I got to Porky the litter eater, they all just cheered. They stood up and cheered. They all knew it.
Okay, clearly I need to get more. I need to bone up on my Cabin John amenities.
Yes. Okay, and last on this slide, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Friday, October 7th at Northwest Branch, and you will get your little kit. If you arrive early, you will get your little kit of all the accoutrement you need for that cult classic. So that was just what is on the website. This is my work. This is not quite as pretty. I just went through what we call the calendar, and I just picked out a smattering of events that go on in September. This is maybe 1/3 of the events we have going on in September. And I tend to pick the bigger ones and the ones that I'm most familiar with because I've attended them personally. And what I wanted to hit on as a theme without really going through each one of these is, in addition to putting on our own programs with our own staff through our park activation team led by Mike Coppersmith, we enable or facilitate and permit a whole bunch of community events in our parks in concert with other entities. We call it a special event process. And quite often, if the event, we believe the event furthers our park's mission of active, urban, and social, we will become co-sponsors. We'll give the event organizer our logo. Then we will promote the event, and we will partner with them in various ways to make the event successful. So I'll just highlight Long Branch Festival coming up over 2 days. This weekend is one of them in Flower Ave Urban Park. It's a great event. Drag Queen Story Hour is put on by the Brookside staff, not necessarily Mike Coppersmith, but that's one of our events that we partner with a third-party entity. Bluegrass on the Farm, I believe, is our event, maybe in partnership with the Friends of the Agricultural History Farm Park. Parks Half Marathon is Montgomery County Roadrunners. That is 3,000 people running through our parks. That's something that is, we want our people in our parks. And even though this is a nonprofit Roadrunners Club event, we do everything we can to partner with them and promote it and make it successful, including our operations staff going the whole length of the course the weekend before and making sure there's no downed trees, that there's no pavement and potholes or anything. Salsa in the Park I talked about as a series, another Yappy Hour at Elm Street Urban Park. We do the Bethesda Urban Partnership. Parking Day is coming up right here, I think, in the back side of the building. We're going to take some of those parking spaces in the surface lot and make a little pop-up park. Friendship Picnic in Wheaton Regional Park in a couple weeks is a huge event. That is Montgomery County Office of Human Rights is the lead, but a lot of entities we partner with. Free music, moon bounces, face painting, and we'll get 2,000 people easily in Wheaton Regional Park who will all get a free lunch. In my neighborhood, Opera in the Circle is a series of events we do at Warner Circle Park with a private company that trains aspiring opera singers. Another huge event, Burtonsville Day, that people don't think of as a park event, but part of it takes place in a park. We co-sponsor that and market it. Thousands of people show up. The L Trail I talked about. And then the Wheaton Arts Parade and Festival, I think both the Planning Department and the Parks Department contribute funding to support that, which will be right out here at the end of the month. So like I said, this is maybe 1/3 of the events I saw on our calendar. So fall is a busy time, and we're going to achieve our mission of making sure there's a lot of happy people out there socializing in our parks. Switching gears to I'm sorry. So this slide is just basically conveying how do people know about all this. Very easy. Go to our website. You can also sign up for a newsletter, and you will get periodic e-newsletters for everything that's going on. But I found this extremely easy to access from our public website and find out about the details about everything going on. Switching gears a little bit to our volunteer program. I can't attend every event, and one of the ways I keep up with what's going on in our large system is our Flickr account of photos. Every time there's an event, our photographers go out and photograph things. I was not personally at this event, but this was an event where 50 volunteer students from the University of Maryland took a bus over to the soon-to-be-open Fairland Bike Park and went through the entire site and cleaned it up and removed a lot of invasive vines. So this is, not only an example of how even our volunteer program is facilitating some of our priorities, like making sure something as exciting as the Fairland Bike Park is looking good when we're ready to open it. And it's also great to get students out in our parks. And one of the things we do more and more now, since we are really, really focusing on recruitment and selection of employees in everything we do, we try to keep people, educate people on interesting careers in the Parks Department and ask them to consider us for employment when they graduate. So that's my last slide. I'll leave that up because those pictures are so nice, but I just want to talk to you about Brookside Gardens Garden of Light show. As you know, it's extremely popular. A year or two ago, we switched from to time tickets, so that instead of a whole bunch of people showing up at the same time in the parking lot getting full, and Glen Ellen Ave backing up all the way to Georgia Avenue, which I personally experienced. Now we've solved that with time tickets, and we space people out. And actually, Stephanie Overly was telling me we probably can accommodate a few more people this year because in the first year we were a little bit conservative with parking capacity and look like we can serve a few more people. But the main issue is pedestrian and bike access. It is not, you know very well from your review of the Wheaton Regional Park Master Plan that as great as Wheaton Regional Park is, the thing it really suffers from is the easy access for by pedestrian and bike, both into the park and throughout the park. The master plan will solve that, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to get there. But for now, we want to provide better pedestrian and bike access to the Garden of Light show. So there is a way into Wheaton Regional Park off of Shorefield Road, off of Georgia Avenue, that we feel is a reasonably bike-friendly point to get to. And we are going to make access available this year from that location through the park. And I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Gary Burnett of our operations, who's been orchestrating this. John Nissel, the prior deputy of operation, had brainstormed with the team about how to make this happen, but hadn't quite figured it out. And I asked Gary to pick it up when he took it over. And he has a plan, and we're ready to make it happen. So let me have him tell you about that.
Again, Gary Burnett, Deputy Director for Montgomery Parks. And so like Mike said, the Shorefield area of Wheaton Regional Park to the Brookside Gardens for the Garden of Light show. It was a priority project. We tried to figure out how to make it work. It's a permanent solution, be very expensive. So what we decided to do is we're doing temporary lights, large diesel light towers up in the parking lot so that people can get into the parking lot and actually down the trail. It's going to be well lit with portable lights to the back gate of the Brookside Gardens. There we will have a contact location. We're bringing a booth in for the staff to be there to make sure and check tickets and make sure that people are already ticketed when they get to that point. The trail is outdoor ADA accessible, so bikes and pedestrians can use the trail. Again, it'll be well lit to get down to the back gate. From the gate to where the starting of the light show at the visitor center is also going to be lit. We have actually string lights. We're going to put that entire direction, that entire 1,200 feet or so to get to the visitor center itself. We will have park police presence roaming throughout the trail. We'll also have operational staff there available to not only start and stop the lights at the beginning and end of the day, but also to make sure they're maintained and fueled and there's no questions. Also for the potential of snow or ice, we'll have staff available and equipment available if need be to be able to monitor and handle any issues that come up that way. So we've started work. I'm doing biweekly meetings, and actually have a meeting again tomorrow to check the progress of where we are. We decided when we started hiking the trail and looking at what was the status, we're doing some modifications to the trail itself, putting up some barriers so that people don't see specific things, get too close to specific things like drainage and those sorts of things. But right now, we're set to have it all up and ready to go, and our test day is November 16th. First day is November 18th, which is a internal operations day for the light show itself, and then it begins fully, I believe, that weekend, and so we'll be ready to go well in advance of that.
Ms. Burnett, I'm sorry. A couple questions. One is, are we doing anything to encourage, I know it's great for bike and pedestrian access, so are we encouraging that there's additional parking there so that everybody, that provides more parking for those coming in other than just around at the visitor center and the nature center? That's number one. And could we add some of the holiday lights, some light display for the holiday lights along the trail so that it also encourages people to take that as an alternative route?
As far as being an alternative parking, our marketing plan is basically going specific to the neighborhoods in that area, and people wanted to bike directly to the light show. And the main reason for that is because of the ticket admissions. The parking is not an issue inside of Brookside Gardens at this point. So we don't, and the capacity of the number of people coming to the light show is set so that additional parking really wouldn't help because it's all ticketed, and so they might as well park right there at the gardens and come in that side. As far as the additional, holiday lights, because we don't have permanent electric there, we really don't have that option to be able to add additional lights. So, no, we're just basically, lighting it for access and for transport at this point. But I don't plan on having anything available. We're going to have it signed. We're going to have people, again, the marketing plan is going to, directly reach especially the people in that area, the people who are interested in biking to that location. But we're not looking for additional parking there right now.
Okay, but maybe in the future we could think about an expansion of the light show into that area at some point, or maybe having some activity there that would encourage people potentially to walk or bike to that area instead of driving. So, but that's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, that's a good idea, and thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the effort that went into this. I know it wasn't, it seems like it should be a straightforward thing, but like a lot of things that seem straightforward, it turns out not to be. So appreciate all the effort that went into figuring this out. And we'll look forward to riding my bike to Gardner Lights. Okay, was there anything else from Parks Director? Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, we can move on to item 5, which is Silver Spring International Middle School. Okay, we're ready for item 5, Silver Spring International Middle School. And to take us through this, we have Katie Mancarini.
Hello. So good morning. As you mentioned, Katie Mancarini with Down County Planning for the record to present mandatory referral MR 2022022, Silver Spring International Middle School. Staff recommends approval with recommendations and requests permission to transmit comments to MCPS and the Board of Education. A little bit about the site. The property is located at 313 Wayne Avenue in Silver Spring, west of the Silver Spring downtown, and is currently in operation. The school site is currently occupied by the middle school, Sligo Creek Elementary School, and Sligo Cabin Neighborhood Park. The site is 16.5 acres and zoned R60, and it's subject to the 2000 North and West Silver Spring Master Plan. Let's get into what they are proposing. So the project proposes a pretty modest project. It's a demo rebuild to remove the existing abandoned auditorium to be replaced with a new athletic facility in its place. And the portion of the building to be demolished is roughly 30,000 square feet, and it's going to be rebuilt with 22,000 square feet. So it's about the same footprint, but a little bit smaller. Okay, and the rebuild will include a couple gymnasiums, staff offices, bathrooms, and locker rooms. And this is really important because currently the athletic facilities are actually in a in a building that is disconnected from the site. And it's located down a steep hill, which presents challenges for students and staff with mobility challenges, especially during inclement weather. The project will add 30 new bicycle parking spaces. Staff is asking that that be increased to 60. And the project also proposes an ADA improvement, which I'm showing here with the arrow, that shows a new accessible pathway to the southern entrance of the building, which houses the Linkages to Learning program, as well as converting some existing parking spaces to marked ADA spaces. All of these changes are internal to the site. As I mentioned, we have a demo rebuild, so I'm showing here one of the elevations of the new construction. This is the north elevation looking south from Schuyler Road. With the recommendations cited in the staff report, the mandatory referral application is consistent with uses allowed by the zone and the general and specific recommendations of the 2000 North and West Silver Spring Plan. The applicant has complied with all submittal and noticing requirements. After posting the staff report, the chair's office did receive written correspondence from the Friends of Sligo Creek, and I'm just going to summarize this briefly. It states that the Purple Line construction has resulted in the removal of many trees on site and has increased impervious surfaces abutting the school. As a result, that correspondence requests that MCPS address these issues and incorporate sustainable building practices into their project. As a reminder, MCPS is not required to mitigate the impacts of the Purple Line project, and therefore these requests are outside the scope of the demo rebuild of the auditorium. The applicant is present, though, to answer any questions that you have if you want to follow up on that. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval with recommendations and requests permission to transmit the comments to MCPS and the Board of Education. And that's what I have for you today.
Great, thank you. And we'll, I think, we don't have any public testifiers, but we'll turn to our friends from MCPS to see if they have any comments. Perhaps they could address this issue of stormwater drainage, sediment control, and related issues, which I take it is the concern of the Friends of Sligo Creek. I assume that they're using state-of-the-practice methods to control runoff, sediment, et cetera.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. Do we have, I see Mr. Adams is here. Do you have anything to say about that or any other aspect of this project, Seth?
Yeah, so good morning and to Planning Chair and members of the Planning Board. Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this project. This has been a very complex project for us. As mentioned, this is pretty modest in terms of some of our work, but the work was generated really around the safety concerns posed by the Purple Line work and the transit stop that would be directly outside. So really making sure students are able to stay within the building confines and not have to leave for core program spaces. But to the point or the question around stormwater management, we have had many conversations with the Purple Line folks. They are using our site as well as the park site at the back for off-site stormwater management mitigation measures. So I do know that the upper parking lot, which they still have yet to complete for us, did include pretty robust stormwater management. And then down the hill, that sort of spans over both the school property and the park property, there's also a significant amount of stormwater management that is scheduled to be installed down there. That work obviously stopped, but is designed and programmed to begin and start up again. So I do know that there is additional stormwater management work that will occur as part of the Purple Line work. For our project, yeah, absolutely, we can continue to look at it, but what we found is that the Purple Line off-site work that was approved does take up a majority of the locations and opportunities to add any additional stormwater management. So we are looking at state of the art for certainly our portion of the project, but we are also continuing to push the Purple Line folks to make sure that they complete the work that they started, as well as start the critical stormwater management work down the hill as well.
Very good. Any other board members have any comments or questions on this?
I do. A couple of things. Number one, although it's outside of our purview, I would ask that if you could, I'm sorry, is it Adams? Mr. Adams, if you could have a response, a formal response, if you would, to the letter that was written by the Friends of Sligo Creek, mainly because they talk about energy efficiency operations, things during that, as I said, is outside of our purview, is the operation of the school. The other comment I'd like to make, this is more of a general comment about mandatory referrals. I would like to see a follow-up from staff on, what we're doing is we're making recommendations in our mandatory referral, but it feels like there's no closure at the end. So it would be nice, because the mandatory referral process part of it is for the public to see actually, what's happening in these public projects that goes beyond just the CIP project. And they see specific issues, and staff makes certain recommendations, and the board approves, or we transmit those recommendations, for example, the increase in the bicycle spaces on this one. So I'd like to see kind of a closure in a potentially, and sometimes I don't know what the timing of that is. It's going to depend on each particular project. But I would like to see just a briefing back to the board so that the public knows the follow-through and what the public agencies are doing in response to our recommendations, whether they're accepting them or not accepting them, so that essentially there's some accountability there. So I appreciate if that is a process that can be followed through on this and other mandatory referrals as they come to the board.
Sure.
I was talking to Dave Ansbacher about a very closely related set of issues about what happens after mandatory referral. Maybe we could talk about that offline and see if there's some ideas that we could bring forward.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? In that case, are we looking for a motion on the mandatory referral, and is there any other regulatory item attached to this?
No forced conservation or anything.
Right, okay, so just the mandatory referral comments. If we could get a motion to approve the mandatory referral comments and to transmit them, that would be great.
So moved.
And second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Very Sushi, aye.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. That's unanimous. Great. Moving right along, we are ready to come back right away for item 6, which is the Claiborne.
Aye.
And now we are on item 6, the Claiborne, and Grace Bogdan is going to tell us what staff thinks about this application.
Good morning. Grace Bogdan for the record with Down County Planning, presenting the Claiborne. This is a new site plan to replace the previously revoked. It's application number 8/2022-0190. This may look familiar to many of you, as the Planning Board had recently approved in February of 2019 a sketch plan amendment, preliminary plan amendment, and site plan amendment to allow a 97,000 square foot mixed-use building with ground floor retail and residential above for up to 84 units with 15% MBDUs. This project did utilize a portion of Bethesda overlay zone density. Therefore, the project is subject to the time limits that are set in the zoning ordinance for moving the project forward under certain time limits. And if those deadlines are not met, then the site plan is revoked. In this case, the applicant did submit an application and have that application accepted by DBS within 2 years of the site plan approval. However, the applicant did not have that building permit issued within 2 years of that acceptance date. So that previous site plan approval, 8/2017-008, as amended, has been revoked. And the applicant is before you today under the new site plan with substantially similar form, maximum density at 97,000 square feet, ground floor retail with residential above. We did review the plan for updates within the code between 2019 and 2022, and those findings are outlined in the report with new set of conditions and a recommendation from staff for approval. We do have additional slides for you if the planning board wishes to briefly go through the proposal. Okay. So as you may recall, this property is located in downtown Bethesda within the Woodmont Triangle area. It has frontage along Auburn Avenue and Norfolk Avenue. It's 0.41 acres in size, zone CR3, and there's 2 height limits on the property, 110 feet, which is closer to the Auburn Avenue frontage, and it steps down to 90 feet closer to Del Rey. And this is within the 2017 Bethesda Downtown Sector Plan. The property is currently, as you can see on the aerial, it's a portion of it is undeveloped, ready for construction, and then there are 3 one-story commercial buildings towards the southern edge of the property. The applicant is proposing to construct a new mixed-use building up to 97,000 square feet with ground floor retail and 84 units, and is proposing 15% MPDUs in conformance with Chapter 25A. As you can see here in the massing on the screen, the 110 feet is focused along the Auburn Avenue frontage, and it steps down to 90 feet closer to the Del Rey area. As previously proposed and maintained, there is a visual amenity located along that southern wall, which is a party wall, but for the interim, there will be a mural located along there. The architecture is of substantial form, similar form and material as the previously proposed. Back in 2019, the Design Advisory Panel recommended 10 points for design excellence. We went back to the DAP earlier this year to determine whether they wanted to re-review the architectural design, and they had declined and remained supportive of 10 points for design excellence. Briefly, in terms of access and circulation, remains essentially the same. It's under a consolidated access point along the Auburn Avenue frontage for the structured parking garage and loading, and that's shown in the red arrows. There are several pedestrian access points along the ground floor area for the residential lobby and the ground floor retail. And the applicant is proposing a couple of important streetscape components, the first of which is an enhanced streetscape, which is above the standards of the Bethesda streetscape standards. And this is mostly focused along the intersection at Auburn Avenue and Norfolk Avenue. And then the applicant is also proposing to do additional streetscape improvements off-site. So as you can see here on the screen, the property line ends along Norfolk Avenue, almost mid-block, a little closer to Del Rey Avenue. However, the applicant is proposing to construct the streetscape extending through to the Del Rey Avenue intersection for a full block of the new streetscape. And then lastly, the applicant is proposing a financial contribution to the master planned Norfolk Avenue shared street, and that financial contribution will go to the Department of Transportation for the future construction of the shared street. The public benefit point package remains substantially similar to the previously approved, receiving points for connectivity and mobility, enhanced accessibility for the disabled, several categories within the quality of building and site design, and protection enhancement of natural environment. And with this new review, the applicant did update the recycling facility plan to be up to code for the new county standards for that. And we received a new agency letter from DEP for that. So with that, staff does find that the new site plan meets the standards of the zoning ordinance as shown in our staff report and is in conformance with the downtown plan. All noticing requirements have been met, and we recommend approval with conditions.
Okay, so basically the same application. Unless the applicant has something to add, I'll just see if the board has any questions or comments.
I'd like just a brief presentation by the applicant, mainly focused on two questions that I have. Number one, I think it'd be great to understand, and for the public listening, what value this project brings to the county, because I think we should be celebrating these kind of projects, particularly that add more housing. And kind of hinting. And then the other question is, how do we get assurance that this is actually going to move forward this time? Because it's great to have plans, but it's even better if they can be implemented.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak before you. We're excited about the
If
project.
you could just state your name for the record, that way we have you.
Yes, my name is Kenrick Walwin with DBT Development. No, we're excited about the project. I know it's been a long time coming, a very, very long time coming. We're excited because we're proposing a for sale product, especially in the condo space, and with the lack of condo options in that particular in Bethesda, in that particular area, we think it adds a lot of value. And so I think from that perspective, from an affordability standpoint, and we see just the migration of people coming into the area. It allows millennials, that younger, to participate in the home buying opportunities, participate in that process. So I think that's the value it brings to the area. As far as the assurances that it will get done, it has been an expensive process over the past few years. Going back to 19, hindsight's 2020. There were a lot of price escalations that we were contending with, and now looking at it, we probably should have moved forward with it. And then I guess over the past year, the ownership structure has changed to where we were partnered with an organization or a company. We bought that company out. And so now we're intently moving forward. The goal is, first, second quarter of next year to really be in the ground, and, outside of any, unforeseeable market conditions. But, that is the actual plan right now. So, we're working with Donahoe Construction still. So, we've gotten the whole band back together. So everybody that was participating, outside of our partners previously, will be participating in the project moving forward, and so that's the goal right now.
Great, thank you. I find it very valuable to actually celebrate some of these projects that are offering opportunity, particularly on a for sale basis.
No,
I think
absolutely.
It's great to get people in there.
No, thank you for the
very
opportunity.
much.
Thank you.
It's a great project. I love it.
Thank you.
If I could just add something really quick too, just something to celebrate. When this came through for the first site plan application, that sort of additional streetscape that you saw, in particular at the corner of Norfolk and Auburn, was really actually also very much celebrated. We worked really, really closely with DOT and DPS right away and Park and Planning on that streetscape. And kind of the idea is that the Bethesda Trolley Trail comes in just north of there, and it's really sort of leading into this sort of arts district, which people think Woodmont Triangle, wants to be, and especially with the Norfolk shared street. So that was just another thing to celebrate, because it was really, people were very enthusiastic about that the first time around.
Do you have a sense of how many 2 or 3 bedroom units you're going to have? Because that's always, interesting. The condo thing is already unique. We're not seeing a lot of condo proposals at this time, but obviously it's hard to get housing in downtown Bethesda. It is highly coveted, and single-family homes are very expensive. So do you have any idea
absolutely.
about that at this
So
point?
I know off the top of my head, there's one 3-bedroom and it will be a mix of ones and twos. I think ones are, I think it's like between ones and twos, it's probably like a 60-40 mix.
Okay.
More ones than twos, but definitely a significant amount of twos, but only one 3-bedroom.
I mean, I'm sure the 3-bedroom will be also very expensive. But,
Yes,
I'm
and
not
that's one of
kidding
the things
myself
that
here,
we're
but-
trying to keep the price point at a level that maintains some level of affordability. In Bethesda, when you stretch out and get those larger units, it kind of drives that price up. So yeah, there's only one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, could we get a motion?
I move approval of the site plan as recommended with the conditions by staff. Is there a
No.
resolution? No. Okay.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry Sushi, aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. We look forward to the groundbreaking.
Thank you so
And
much.
even better, the ribbon cutting.
And
As
don't
Mike
ask
Leggett
about
always
Bruno.
used to say, right? The ribbon cutting is the best part.
I had to correct me on the actual how to say that because I don't have kids. So I'm like, was it forget about Bruno? Don't ask about Bruno.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute for item 7, Horizon Hill. It's time for item 7, which is a Forest Conservation Plan amendment to change some easements on a lot at 10813 Red Barn Lane in Potomac. And Stephen Peck is here to explain this.
Stephen Peck, Senior Forest Conservation Inspector with Intake and Regulatory Coordination, presenting the Forest Conservation Plan Amendment, amending Forest Conservation Plan 8, 1999-0440, and this is the A amendment. Photos are of the property. The property is approximately 6 acres, 4.7 plus acres are in Category 1 conservation easement. The property is in the Piney Branch Special Protection Area. It is like a flag lot at the southwest corner of the subdivision. The approved NRI-FSD noted as is required all of the steep slopes, environmental features, including the stream buffer. And these, the buildable areas of the subdivision were the areas that were up high, that was like former pasture, and the areas protected, like forest retention protection, were the areas that were the steep slopes and the gray shading. A lot of that's stream buffer. It's where like two streams meet. So there's the main stem of Piney Branch, which is, and then there's a tributary of Piney Branch, and they sort of meet at the corner of the lot. The subdivision approval, this lot's one of the 20 lots that was approved by the board. The final forest conservation plan was approved with the site plan. Well, it was conditioned by the site plan and then approved after the site plan's approval. The preliminary approvals required forest retention over the areas that were the forested areas. This is an image of the final forest conservation plan of the subject property. The property wasn't built out the way is shown on the plan. That's typical for this time period. The house is actually built closer to the conservation easement than shown on the plan. The garage is not there. This is the existing 2019 aerial photo of the subject property. You can see the house. There's a detached garage, garage and detached garage. And the amendment relates to an area of mowed conservation easement immediately behind the house, where the applicant also would like to build a pool. This is a photo of approximate area in question. It's a 0.13 acres of conservation easement being proposed to be released with mitigation in the same watershed on an adjacent lot of forest planting plus substantial planting on the property to enhance and make the forest that is there more resilient. The trees in question are really only 3 trees that are existing, that from the time of the approval around 2000 to now, there's only 3 trees in this area right now that would be affected by this amendment. There's a walnut tree. In the background, there's this dying specimen black oak that they got a variance request as part of the application. And there's a leaning cherry tree. And the rest is this area that's lawn. The applicant was given an opportunity to submit an amendment for the complete project. But at the same time, they've been complying, bringing the areas into compliance. There was a mowed area where This area in here was recently planted with trees, and the fence was relocated up, and so that area is being reverted back to forest. The amendment would propose reforesting all areas that are currently mowed into forest. It's worth noting that the Forest Conservation Plan, the final Forest Conservation Plan, didn't require planting of the stream valley buffer as part of its approval. So some areas in question were not required to be planted in forest, but don't regenerate because of deer and invasive plant pressure. The amendment for releasing of 0.013 acres, which is not in the Forest Stream Valley Buffer, the Forest Stream Valley Buffer, as defined by the approved NRIFSD, would not be impacted by this, and all the Forest Stream Valley Buffer would be protected. The area in question to be for release is above that, is not in that Stream Valley Buffer. The mitigation would be 2-to-1 in the same subdivision on a lot that's just upstream. It's lot 41, an area that it wasn't required to be forested through the Forest Conservation Plan, but doesn't regenerate on its own due to the invasive plants and the deer pressure. And 0.26 acres will be planted there and maintained for 5 years. There's a forest enhancement proposed at a half-acre edge along the new Category 1 conservation easement where the non-native invasive oriental bittersweet and porcelainberry and other invasive vines will be managed and supplemental planting will occur. In addition to planting the areas, there's a few planting areas where they were previously mowed that will be planted back. The specimen tree that's in decline is proposed to be mitigated with 4 black oak trees. Permanent fencing is proposed at the new conservation easement boundary. Here's some photos of when you get behind the house and you just keep walking down, you can really stumble down the hill. It's 20%, 30% slopes. So if you take a look at the photo, this Stream Valley Buffer is being protected by the applicant. This is where Piney Branch Stream meets a tributary. You could lose track of the fact that you're in Montgomery County when you're out there. Well, the amendment also includes adding an area that was a trail. When the site plan was approved, a condition was that there would be a 20-foot wide trail easement for a 4-foot natural surface path with 2 4-foot wide cleared shoulders. And that was a condition of the site plan. It's here written, it's condition 1I, 20-foot wide public pedestrian trail easement prohibiting motorized vehicles containing a 4-foot wide natural surface trail, 4-foot wide clear shoulders, providing access from Red Barn Lane down to the Stream Valley. And it was to connect to this other trail that's like off-site. Now, recent inspections out there show that it's not been maintained. Now, this is a photo of the current trail conditions as of a few weeks ago. It appears in 2005, 2006, it may have been put in per the site plan conditions, but it's not being maintained. And since its natural surface is compatible with the Category 1 conservation easement in a Forest Stream Valley Buffer. So this area that was excluded at the time of record plat, which recorded the easement, it was excluded from the Category 1 easement, is to be included in conservation easement with this amendment, and the area to be included is 0.17 acres. And that's highlighted here. When you walk this, it gets to be impassable as you even leave this property. You couldn't even possibly walk it if, but this amendment doesn't propose to change the trail easement, just to add it to protection for forests, because it's in a sensitive environmental area.
And so this is not an enforcement proceeding, but I guess the applicant is on notice that the expectation is they're going to have to maintain this. Is that right?
It was unclear who needed to maintain the trail, so this is not getting into that. This is just that, hey, it should be, the trail easement should stay, but it should be also forest easement, because you can have natural surface trails in a forest.
Yeah, it's part of the forest conservation easement. It's not carved out.
I don't think it should have been carved out at the time of record plat, but somehow it was.
Yeah.
Does anyone even use the trail? I mean, it's on private property, and does it connect to anything?
It connects
know,
to a
it's-
neighbor's property, but the rock ford that was supposed to be put in, the stream crossing, it's all blown out. From my understanding, it's rarely used.
But it does connect to an adjoining.
It connects to a property, it might have been the former Junkin property, but you couldn't get anywhere from there other to maybe the Piney Branch stream. So you couldn't, it doesn't connect anything. Yeah. Just to this one private property.
I mean, is it even necessary to retain the easement?
I think we're not suggesting to change the easement right now, just we haven't touched that piece. This would allow the easement to remain if somebody wants it in the future. We're just adding it to the forest conservation easement because they're compatible.
I mean, it sort of depends on what the person next door wants to do, but if they want to do it, this establishes that there should be a opportunity to connect, I think. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, and then the offsite is just upstream on lot 41, so it's in the same watershed. It's in same neighborhood, same subdivision. It's an area at 10807 Red Barn Lane. That property owner has signed an access agreement to allow this work, if approved, to happen, which is the forest planting of 0.26 acres and 5 years of maintenance, 100% survival of the proposed planting of the trees, that is, 75% of the shrubs. The pool itself, the design of it is to be done, if approved, to not affect any part of the conservation easement. And in that, a new condition is proposed, part from the applicant and part from staff. So I'll read it out. I've underlined there's like 7 parts that have to be met in order for the first part to happen, if approved. And that would be, the applicant may start approved clearing, grading, and construction within the limits of disturbance on the forest conservation plan after the new forest conservation easement deed is recorded. The deed of release for the existing conservation easement is submitted to staff. Staff approves all of the financial security. This includes the forest planting on lot 38 and lot 41. Staff and the applicant conduct the planting meeting for the new planting and non-native invasive plant management. The applicant stakes the new Category 1 conservation easement boundary and installs the permanent conservation easement boundary fencing, which would be installed first. And the applicant holds the required pre-construction meeting with the appropriate inspectors, Department of Permitting Services, Sediment Control, and Forest Conservation. And then approved grading can only occur on the property. This is standard after sediment control inspector approval and final forest conservation inspector approval. So this is a new condition proposed here today. In summary, the amendment does not affect any forest stream valley buffer. It's proposing removal of 0.13 acres of easement. The trail easement that was not included in the Category 1 protection is to be added into protection. There's a half-acre supplemental planting along the forest edge. Any mowed areas to be retained in easement will be reforested. And there's a 5-year maintenance management agreement on the planting, plus 0.26 acres of forest planting in the same Piney Branch watershed at a 2-to-1 rate, and that will be maintained for 5 years. So staff recommends approval of the amendment with the addition of condition 9.
So Mr. Peck, the way I see this is that because the forest conservation area will be clearly delineated through fencing, hopefully there's no risk that when the pool is designed and constructed, it will not impact any of that forest conservation. And this is essentially said with a warning to the applicant to be very careful about this, because the next time it could be even more expensive because you might have to relocate your pool.
Yes, that's right.
I had a general question because, we had a similar situation not that long ago. And I understand every set of facts is different. Every scenario is different. Why is this happening? Is there just a lack of understanding of what needs to be done on these properties, where they should be mowing, where they shouldn't be mowing, where should the natural forest just continue to grow without any kind of, maintenance from the owner? Do you want to speak to that, or maybe even if the applicant wants to explain, where the confusion was, because I think this is the second case we've seen in about obviously we were in recess, but just wanted to have a sense of what's happening here.
I think in part, the conservation easements are part of the land, but, requirements to permanently mark them, especially at the time of this plan, a 2000 plan, property built in 2005, 2006, even if there were permanent markers, they might have been there for a few years and probably gone. So the plan didn't require permanent fencing at the conservation easement edge. And so you can get someone's backyard, you can get what's known as like mowing creep, and they'll start mowing it a little bit more and more, and then you'll come in and identify them to correct it. But then there's an inherent issue with like houses being built pretty close to conservation easement boundaries where you can't do any mowing, and a normal backyard you want to have a backyard space. And so this house ended up say like 30 to 40 feet from the forest conservation easement edge, where the plan showed maybe 60 feet away. And this is a typical occurrence where houses get built right on top of areas that aren't supposed to be used as a backyard, and you don't have backyard space for residential uses, which were intended when the subdivision was approved.
Yeah, my understanding historically is that we used to, or the board used to require, didn't really think in terms of where the house was going to go, because many times in the preliminary plans, it's illustrative. And so there wasn't clear delineation, but now we're much more mindful of buildable areas when we're approving subdivisions. And the other part of it is that for usable backyards, but we're also, from a technology standpoint, it's our easements are more clearly delineated and give notice to DPS when they issue permits for their construction, so they can see more readily where the limitations of those easements are, which it wasn't as clear before. So this is it was a problem in the past, but I think we're getting to resolution of that for future.
I would also add, though, this is why it's important to add fencing when an easement is on a residential lot like this. The board has a policy where we don't really put easements on lots of like 2 acres, but this is a 6-acre lot, and you still run into the same issue when the house is built far back. So fencing, I think, really helps.
I think it would be helpful to hear from the applicant because this is the kind of scenario that we are seeing, and I want to hear what happened here.
Well, first of all, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and if you can state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Gary Farha, and I'm the homeowner. We are the original owners of the property when it was developed, so we've been there since 2006 when it was built. So I was aware of the easement when we did the property. The rear garage, by the way, actually was approved back then to actually shift it back further. I'm not sure if it was by this board or by whatever entity was in place at that time. What we've tried to do is really conserve the property. We've been very sensitive to trees. We have not taken down any trees in the area. Some have fallen, one on my house, one on the separate garage. And even with that, we've been very careful to preserve everything that was there. The reason that in our case, the grass crept back was when we got a dog in about 10 years ago. It was very natural for us to tie the fence line to the rear garage so that the whole lot would be sort of cordoned off for the dog and keep ticks out, which we found early days were a real problem. There's a lot of deer in our area. And so I do think because of that, then the grass sort of crept back towards the fence before Stephen asked us to relocate it several months ago, which we've done and now planted behind.
Thank you, that's helpful. And are there just regular inspections? How did you become aware of the violation itself? Obviously there's a lot of houses like this that back up to these kind of scenarios, but I'm just curious, is there just a general check-in, or was this a result of a complaint?
No, I think it was more of an inquiry from the contracting pool company, saying, I have a potential client who wants to build on their property, and just that conversation led to, well, where are you exactly going to build this pool? And then that's how I ended up out there. But there are routine inspections that occur generally, like on a subdivision level, on a rotating basis of conservation areas.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, could we get a motion?
I move approval for the Forest Conservation Plan amendment as recommended by staff.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jerry Sishy, aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Thank you very much. And we'll be back in a minute for item 9, only acre. We're back for item 9, only acres preliminary plan with Jeffrey Serber.
Good morning, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeff Server with the Up County Planning Division. Before you today is the only acres preliminary plan. It's preliminary plan number 12022-0070. Staff recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plan and final forest conservation plan. This application focuses on the subdivision of the subject property in order to create a 0.98 acre lot for an existing residential care facility, in this case the Alfred House, and an outlot of approximately 3.98 acres. The subject property is located on the west side of Cashel Road and just directly adjacent to Archwood Way. And this is also located southwest of the intersection of Bowie Mill Road and Cashel Road. The subject property is an approximately 4.96 acre polygonal lot, subject to the 2005 only master plan. And as mentioned, it contains the existing Alfred House residential care facility, and as there are some existing structures and an existing driveway that are also on the subject property, and it is all zoned RE1. As I mentioned, the proposal is focused on subdividing an existing lot into the less than 1 acre lot for the existing Alfred House facility and an outlot of the balance, which is 3.98 acres. Within Lot 1, there is a new driveway proposed, and there is no further construction proposed for the outlot outside of reconfiguring the driveway apron so that it does not encroach within Lot 1, and then the clearing of any existing buildings. Looking at the forest conservation plan, there are no existing forest or environmentally sensitive features located on the subject property. There will be a requirement for approximately 1 acre of afforestation, and the afforestation requirements to be met by planting as an approved forest bank or fee in lieu payment. The variance trees are identified in this graphic with a star, and you can see the corresponding number. There are a total of 5 trees that would be impacted. None of the variance trees are being removed, and there's no variance tree mitigation required. Looking at the adequate public facilities, this application is exempt from LATR review. There's not going to be a net increase in trips, and as such, there's no traffic study required. Additionally, there are no frontage improvements required, as this falls below the minimum threshold for that. This is a result of there not being any change in square footage, dwellings, or trips. The existing sidewalk and driveways will continue to provide safe and adequate access. The site is served by public water and sewer. This application is also exempt from stormwater management requirements, again, because there's no new construction proposed outside of the driveway at Lot 1, and the minor reduction of the apron width for the existing driveway on the outlot. This application is also exempt from fire department access plan, as there's not any new construction proposed, and it will continue to meet the fire access and water supply requirements for Lot 1. This application does not have any impact on schools, as it's solely creating a new lot for the existing residential care facility and the new outlot. This application conforms to the 2005 only master plan. Public facilities are adequate, complies with all the provisions of the subdivision regulations, meets all the requirements of the RE1 zone. The lots are appropriate with respect to size, shape, width, and orientation for the proposed use, complies with Chapter 22A for forest conservation, and it meets all the findings and requirements for the preliminary plan. Staff has not received any correspondence at this time regarding the application, and in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the preliminary plan number 12022-0070, the final forest conservation plan with conditions, and adoption of the resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Carrier, do you have anything to add to that?
For the record, Françoise Carrier with the law firm of Bregman, Burbert, Schwartz, and Gilday, representing the applicant. The applicant, Dr. Vina Alfred, is with us by video, and so is our project engineer, Patrick LeVay. Thank you to the staff for working through the technical details of this application with us. And the applicant accepts all the conditions and is happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I find this pretty straightforward. I appreciate the creation of the outlot so that if and when development comes forward, we can look at it at the in the appropriate context. So with that, I recommend, or I move for approval of the preliminary plan with conditions and the final forest conservation plan with conditions and adoption of the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Jerry Sishi, aye.
That's unanimous. Great, thank you. Time for item 10. All right, we're ready now to consider what comments we want to make on ZTA 2208, which concerns MPDUs in the CR zones. And Lisa Gavani is going to tell us what the staff thinks about this.
Good morning, Planning Board. For the record, Lisa Gavoni with Countywide Planning and Policy. And today I will be talking about ZTA 2208, which concerns commercial residential zones and MPDUs. As an overview, staff is going to recommend that the Planning Board transmit a memo to the District Council in support of ZTA 2208 with revisions. The ZTA provides clarification that the standard method development in the CRN zone may use the MPDU incentive or the bonus density provided by section 4.5.2.c of the zoning code. ZTA 2208 was introduced on July 26, 2022 by Councilmember Friedson, and a public hearing is tentatively scheduled for September 13th. The intent is to clarify that the MPDU development provisions apply to the CRN zone and apply site plan review to all MPDU incentive density projects. So first, let's talk about ZTA 2208 as introduced. As introduced, ZTA 2208 amends section 4.5.3.a, the in general section, and it reads, in the CRN zone, the maximum total non-residential and residential FAR and maximum height for any property are set by the zone shown of the zoning map, unless additional height and density is permitted under section 4.5.2.c. And this intent is to clarify that in the CRN zone, additional height and density may be permitted under section 4.5.2.c, which is the development with moderately priced dwelling units and other income restricted housing section of the zoning code. The ZTA also amends section 4.5.3.b procedures for approval, which states that in the CRN zone, site plan approval is required for applications that develop under section 4.5.2.c. The intent is to ensure that CRN zone properties using the MPDU incentives are reviewed by a site plan. CRN is only standard method development and may not always require a site plan approval, which is why this is needed. Staff has a few recommendations for revisions to the zoning text amendment. First, by calling out just the CRN zone, it could be interpreted that only the CRN zone may use section 4.5.2.c, whereas the intent is all CR zones may use this section. Staff recommends making that clarification to the text of the ZTA by striking the CRN zone and adding the words any of the commercial residential zones. Second, staff recommends amending section 4.5.3.b with procedures for approval. The intent was to ensure that all projects developed under section 4.5.2.c require a site plan. The CRT zone, for example, also has properties that are mapped at FAR densities that could qualify as standard method. Therefore, a site plan should apply broadly to all CR properties using MPDU incentives, not just CRN zone properties. And the last recommended revision staff recommends is to the table under 4.5.3.c, which is the CRN, CRT, and CRT zones, standard method development standards, which is the table that sets standard method development standards and max density for CR zones under standard methods. So the recommended revision is that we add a B, which is density may be increased above the limit set forth above with MPDU and other income restricted housing per section 4.5.3.c. This new specification makes it clear that density under the standard method of development may be increased based on the provisions of section 4.5.3.c. And this change would also ensure that no matter what section of the code is read, the intent of allowing standard method commercial residential zone property to use additional MPDU density is clear. And OLO anticipates that ZTA 2208 will have little to no impact on Res-J within the county, since the ZTA is a clarification of policy and not creating a new policy. And finally, in conclusion, staff recommends the Planning Board transmit a memo to the District Council supporting ZTA 2208 with revisions recommended by staff. The amended ZTA as recommended by staff would more precisely meet the intent, which is to clarify that all CR zone properties may use MPDU incentives and that site plans are required for all such projects. And that's it. Any questions?
Any comments or questions from the board? Or motions?
I move approval to transmit comments as Ms. Goni indicated. Thank you for making it clearer. And we're always looking for clarity. So,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jury Sishi, aye.
Opposed? That is approved unanimously. And now it's time for item 11, which is ZTA 2209, on accessory structure use standards. We are back for item 11, ZTA 2209, which is concerned with accessory structure use standards, particularly swimming pools. And Jason Sartori is here to tell us about staff's views on this topic.
Great, thank you. For the record, Jason Sartori, Chief of Countywide Planning and Policy in the Planning Department. And I have the great pleasure of presenting ZTA 2209 to you this morning while Mr. Burbard is away on vacation. And it is a stark reminder to me that I need to stop approving his vacation requests. But we will move forward. So this ZTA would amend the accessory structure provisions in the zoning code to generally allow up to 1,200 square feet of accessory structure footprint if one of the accessory structures is a pool enclosure. Planning staff is recommending that the planning board transmit a memo to the district council opposing ZTA 2209. So the ZTA was introduced on July 26 by Councilmember Reamer and co-sponsored by Councilmember Hucker. The public hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday, September 13th. And as I just mentioned, the ZTA would increase the cumulative footprint allowed for accessory structures if one of those accessory structures is a transparent or translucent pool enclosure with a maximum height of 7 feet. To achieve this, the ZTA modifies two sections of the zoning code. The first is the accessory structure use standards, which are contained in section 3.7 of the code. The additional language proposed through the ZTA is shown on the screen here in the underlined text. Hold it there for a second. The ZTA also updates the development standards tables for the standard method of development for agricultural, rural residential, and residential detached sets of zones. And again, the proposed changes are shown here. In this case, this is the R90 zone example, but essentially it's incorporating the same text as shown on the previous slide to each of the applicable tables for each of the zones. Under the existing code, the cumulative footprint of accessory structures is limited to 50% of the footprint of the principal structure or 600 square feet, whichever is greater. Now, you may recall that this section of code was just updated by the District Council through the adoption of ZTA 21-10 just 6 months ago. In that ZTA, the Council reaffirmed the accessory structure limits and clarified that the limit is a cumulative footprint, not a limit that applies to each accessory structure individually. This new ZTA would allow that cumulative footprint limit for all accessory structures to increase to 1,200 square feet if one of the accessory structures is a pool enclosure, but it would still maintain the 50% or 600 square foot limit on all other accessory structures. Now, planning staff opposes the ZTA for a number of reasons. One reason, which wasn't discussed directly in our staff report, but I think is worth mentioning, considering that the planning department and the planning board serve as the council's primary advisors on the zoning code, and one of our responsibilities is to ensure that the code can be fairly and easily applied and the code does not become overly cluttered with endless exceptions to the rules, is that this ZTA seems to invite potentially a whole host of similar ZTAs for other types of accessory structures. So today it's a pool enclosure which, from a practical perspective, could really only be placed over an in-ground pool. But tomorrow it could be a request for an exception for an enclosure over an above-ground pool. Or it could be an exception for a greenhouse like the one you see here, or an exception for a detached screened-in patio, or an exception for a permanent sukkah structure. Now, here's another greenhouse image that I found. Google is amazing. And this structure, it's possible that a structure like this could even qualify if it was 7 feet in height as a potential pool enclosure under the proposed ZTA. It's possible that the board and the council actually believe that these types of accessory structures are different than and should be treated differently from other accessory structures, such as a detached garage or shed. But if that's the case, the council should consider a ZTA that distinguishes this different group of accessory structures and sets different applicable standards for that group, rather than adding code that establishes an exception to the rule for each specific structure type. Each time a homeowner wants to build a type of structure, accessory structure, that would otherwise not be allowed. So I think that this is really, part of our first reason here for opposing the ZTA, this idea of being impractical. But also with regard to height, the ZTA seems overly restrictive and possibly intended to accommodate a very specific brand and model of enclosure. The second concern that staff had with the ZTA is its lack of definitions. The term pool enclosure could be interpreted to mean a fence around a pool. In fact, I did a quick search earlier today of zoning codes from other jurisdictions, and several of them had definitions for pool enclosure, and it included specifically a fence. So not defining what constitutes a pool enclosure could leave open the possibility for future confusion and misinterpretation when a property owner seeks a permit for a pool enclosure. And then without clearly identifying the type of pool the enclosure is intended to enclose, it leaves the zoning code vulnerable to misuse through potential loopholes. As I mentioned earlier, ZTA 21-10 was adopted just 6 months ago with the intent of closing a loophole. The Court of Special Appeals ruled just last year that the zoning code could be interpreted to apply the footprint limit to each individual accessory structure on a property. So ZTA 21-10 closed that loophole, and more importantly, reconfirmed the council's desire to limit the cumulative footprint of accessory structures to 50% of the principal structure, or 600 square feet. With this ZTA, without defining what type of pool must be enclosed within the enclosure, a property owner could put a 1,200 square foot pool enclosure over this. Now, we're not just making this up. We have this concern because it's not uncommon to see people try to take advantage of loopholes like this. A pool enclosure could be built over a small kiddie pool and otherwise be used as a large translucent storage shed. Does the pool even have to have water or be inflated in this case? There's a need for some clarity in the ZTA as it's proposed. We did receive from the Office of Legislative Oversight a racial equity and social justice impact statement, which stated that while homeownership is higher among white and Asian groups, it's expected that few residents would utilize the provisions in the ZTA, and therefore OLO believed that it would have little to no impact on racial equity and social justice in the county. And then just in closing, again, the staff recommends the planning board transmit a memo to the district council not supporting the ZTA as introduced.
Ms. Carey, you can come up here while we're sorting our issues out. I had a couple questions, but if somebody else wants to say anything before we hear from Ms. Carey or me, that would be fine. Or you can wait.
Okay, thank you again for the record. Françoise Carrier with the law firm of Bregman, Burbert, Schwartz, and Gilday. I'm here on behalf of two
I'm not
county-
entirely sure your mic's on.
Maybe
it's
I'm
hard
just
to
not
say.
close enough to it.
Yeah, there you
Is
go.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm here on behalf of two Montgomery County homeowners who are supporting this CTA because they would like to enclose their pool so that they can live there, use the pool year-round. I appreciate that. I appreciate staff's, very close analysis of this ZTA. My clients were unable to get a building permit for the enclosure because DPS determined that it was a building, not a structure, and therefore the size limits that apply to accessory buildings prohibited them from getting a building permit. This CTA was crafted by legal counsel to the county council with input from DPS and other county council staff members. During the process of all of that input and consultation, additional details were added in an effort to avoid unintentionally permitting something more than what this CTA seeks to accomplish, which is to allow homeowners to put an enclosure on a pool that will allow them to swim during the wintertime. The ZTA serves its function. If planning staff felt that there should be a definition, then it would be great to suggest whatever definition they felt would improve on the ZTA. It's my hope that the planning board will accept the ZTA as something that already has support from other agencies and will really serve a goal that should not be difficult for a homeowner to achieve. This is a pretty innocuous use. I do have some pictures of one particular style of pool enclosure that is what my clients intend to purchase. If I could ask you to open up the pictures for that, you will see that these pictures were not taken necessarily in Montgomery County. I don't know where they come from, the website, from the manufacturer. This is a picture of a pool enclosure in the closed state. There's a door behind that big plant, and so you can walk in that door, and then there's enough space to have like a chair to put your towel on or clothes if you're going out there in the wintertime. The enclosure itself is not connected to power. It doesn't generate heat. The pool would be heated in this case. And so the cover sort of traps the heat coming off the pool. and makes it so it's warm enough so that people can go out there in the wintertime to use it. The outside is made of panels, and if we could have the next slide, please. This one, oops. Well, this is okay, so there's a picture of what it looks like when it's open. This is what it would look like, this particular one, you know, there certainly could be others, would look like during the warm weather months. It's made of a series of panels, and they slide together to open it up. And you can see that the area underneath where those panels are is where you would put a chair or table maybe for when you come in during the colder months. And I have one more picture. Thank you. This is a close-up, so you can see what the panels look like on this particular brand. They're panels that sit in a track. The track is connected to the concrete around the pool. The panels can be taken off. But this is what it looks like close up. And translucent and transparent is something that was added to the ZTA in order to make it less likely that somebody would take advantage of this to pretend they're putting in a pool enclosure and in fact put in something else. I understand staff's concern about something that's too broad, but I think they've kind of created a parade of horribles that are so unlikely that it's hard for me to see that as a good thing to drive the planning board's decision on this. These remotely possible excessive somebody taking advantage of this, rather than making a decision on the purpose of this ZTA, which is to allow an innocuous use for neighbors that will be really beneficial to the few homeowners who want to do this. Swimming is a very good form of exercise. It can be helpful therapy for certain medical conditions. It can be part of an aging in place strategy. So these are all the reasons that I hope you will support it, and if I can answer any questions, of course, I'm happy to do so.
You mentioned other agencies are in agreement with the ZTA. Can you expand on that?
Sure. We worked with DPS on this because it was a DPS interpretation question that necessitated the ZTA. And so I wanted to make sure that we would not end up with a ZTA that, in fact, DPS still thinks would not result in granting a building permit for this kind of structure. So council staff and DPS staff were gracious enough to meet with me. And so we got input from DPS about what elements they thought made this acceptable. We talked about the kind of pool enclosure involved. I showed them the pictures that I just showed you, and they said, well, if it's translucent or transparent, that's very helpful. We're not going to be so worried about it. I think that when the application was first put in, they were concerned it was going to look like a tennis bubble and be kind of maybe a little on the big side and in terms of width and height and opaque. And so once they saw the pictures, they realized, oh, we could put some limitations on this that would make it acceptable so that it's not going to be an enforcement problem for them by creating sort of pop-up structures all over the county that people are using to store cars or furniture or whatever else it is they want to store that they don't want to put in a shed, or they can't, or want a really, really big shed. I feel comfortable. DPS does not take official positions on ZTAs, but I feel like I can tell you that certainly the people who were present, which was 2 or 3 members of staff who deal with zoning issues, were comfortable with the direction that ZTA was headed in. And we do have 2 sponsors on the county council and 2 other members who have given verbal support.
I had one more question. Has staff worked with DPS on this issue and gotten any feedback from them on the implementation of the ZTA?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we have our normal zoning discussions, and this came up in those discussions, but we haven't tried to work through any other revisions to this particular ZTA.
Okay. I just think that's an important point to make because that's the impetus for this discussion, is that it originated from DPS. So if they find the language to be appropriate per their business process, I tend to kind of look to them for that review, but it sounds
Yeah,
like the
just to be
director has something to
clear,
say.
it didn't originate with DPS. It was a private owner who had an idea, and they passed their language by DPS, and DPS said this language would solve the specific application that had generated the concern.
Yeah,
Is
in
that-
my experience, DPS isn't making value judgments about whether they like it or not. They're just trying to figure out, can we administer this?
Yeah.
Is it consistent?
Is it binary enough for them to figure
Yeah, they're
out?
typically not going to.
Sure.
Not only are they not going to weigh in formally, they generally are
No,
not.
but it's helpful to know what their position is so we can have an idea of what direction to move in. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
I'm done.
So I look this as just, I wouldn't want to put these particular homeowners, although ZTA is not supposed to address specific problems. I see I would approve it to allow it to move forward, but it would be, to me, a temporary fix. I think that what I don't want to go back to is the old zoning ordinance that had exceptions and for every little tiny thing. So what I would really like to see, and I think it's not feasible right now because there's a hearing set for next week, and I understand that there's been a lot of work on this, but I think that that DPS needs better direction. I think that this is the reason for this is that I see that we're constantly through ZTAs twisting ourselves in pretzels because they have an individual problem. So what I would really like to see, I want this to go forward as, or I would approve it as a temporary measure to get moving, to allow this DPS to approve the applications for permits that are standing with them now. But I do think that I would like to see staff look at distinguishing between an accessory structure and an accessory building. And I think that that's the real problem here, is because the two terms are conflated throughout the zoning ordinance. It's even actually mixed up in this particular ZTA, where it talks about this enclosure as a building. It's not a building. There's a difference between buildings and structures, and if we want to use a different term than structure, maybe that makes it better. But I think that the real problem exists in in kind of what the practical form is of a particular accessory thing, okay? Whether it's a structure or whether it's a building, there should be clear language distinguishing them. And I think, I'm looking at the pictures that have been presented. This is not a building, but it's being looked at in the same vein.
Yeah, this is
And
something that ends up
right,
taking hours and hours and hours of
Right.
discussion on many different topics, whether it be a little gazebo in a backyard or,
Exactly.
the issue of building and structure and foundations.
There's- there's
it's
distinction.
a huge issue.
Yeah, there's distinctions between a deck or an enclosed screen porch. There are distinctions between a simple pull enclosure and a lanai. There are differences between whether it's a garage attached or detached and a carport in the way that the form is. And the zoning ordinance is supposed to be form-based. So I would like to, I'm going to go forward and approve and recommend approval. But I'm going to recommend it. But I do think as a future, I would really like to see the zoning ordinance cleaned up in terms of distinguishing between what is kind of a more obtrusive accessory building and what would be more of something that falls in line with this enclosure or a temporary, greenhouse or something that doesn't create the same level of intrusion by the neighbors and things of that nature. So,
I just have a couple questions, which I hope will be consistent with what Carol said, but I'm trying to understand this in terms of what are the functional purposes that are achieved by the code. I think that in this case there are two. and they concern basically concepts like lot coverage and setbacks and building height, or structure height, if you prefer. As far as I'm aware, there's two ideas that are behind those kinds of restrictions. One is how much impervious cover is on the lot, and that affects things like stormwater performance. And the other one is aesthetic. Like if you've got all kinds of stuff all over your lot, at some point it becomes, I guess at least in theory, aesthetically a mess, not attractive. So my question is, with respect to accessory structures in general, as well as this particular type of accessory structure, would this ZTA have the effect of increasing, going beyond what would otherwise be a limitation on lot coverage or other footprint, buildable area on the lot?
It wouldn't, to the extent that those lot coverage limits would still pertain to each individual situation. Now, it may be different because my understanding is that a pool does not count towards the lot coverage, but this enclosure would now, as an accessory structure, would count towards it.
Well, that's kind of where I was going, is to me, when you're talking about the precedent this was set, and what about greenhouses, and what about this, and what about that, I guess my reaction is, well, so what, unless it means that the effect is to open up the amount of space that can be covered on the lot. So I guess my,
Grass is not coming.
I don't know where that's coming from.
Jerry.
Oh, Jerry is, I got some background chatter. Bear with.
Excuse me, sorry. I did have some comments if I could at some point.
Yeah, hold on just 1 second, Jerry. So
Sure, will do.
my question is, and I direct this to Ms. Carey as well, would it be appropriate to say yes, as long as we were explicit, and I take it that it would be covered by existing lot coverage, setback, et cetera, as long as it's otherwise consistent with the, form-based elements of the, code in the relevant zone. And I use form-based very loosely to include things like setbacks, not just how tall things can be and those sort of issues. But as long as you're not expanding sort of the envelope beyond which you otherwise be able to build, I guess I'm not really, that seems to me to be the relevant, salient point as far as doing violence to the reasonable expectations of the neighbors and the broader objectives of the zoning code. And the reason why we have certain restrictions on what you can build and what you can't build is trying to limit the amount of space you can take up and the aesthetic as well as the environmental impact of things that you put on your property.
Well, and I think to piggyback on that, I agree with what you're saying, that those are the kinds of characteristics that should be addressed when staff is looking at distinguishing or recommending a distinction between potentially an accessory use and an accessory building in that regard. And I think those are the things that we can talk, that could be presented in the definition that distinguishes, so that DPS has a little bit better clarity in how to accept a permit, what it is exactly that they're looking at.
Could we just get clarification, and it may be from legal, or it may be from other staff, that a swimming pool is not covered under lot coverage? In R90 zone, you have like a 35% lot coverage or something. It is not included under lot coverage. But once you put this structure on it, it would be included under lot coverage. I just want to make sure we all have the correct information.
That is my understanding.
Looks like we have a staff member that's going to join us.
Yeah, maybe Mark Beal, who is a longtime DPS employee and now our employee, knows the zoning info quite well.
Good morning, how are you all doing? A swimming pool, Mark Beal for the record, sorry. A swimming pool by itself is not included in lot coverage. Putting a structure over top of it with a roof would be included in lot coverage.
Okay, great. So my suggestion would be that we transmit some comments that say, we're fine with the CTA. We want to make sure that it's explicit. I mean, it sounds like it already would, by operation of other parts of the law, be included within lot coverage, setback, other standards of the zone. Maybe not setback, I'm not sure about that. But I think what we should say is that we're okay with this as long as it would otherwise be within the envelope of what could be built on the lot. And I don't know that we need to sort that out all like sitting here right now what the particulars of that are, but I think it's sufficient for our comments to say, fine, as long as we're not basically creating this sort of backdoor to expand the available. Yeah, it meets all the development standards.
If I could just interject, you're right, of course, that that's a very important point that I should have mentioned. The homeowner who wants to do this is making a choice, and that choice is going to preclude them from doing other things. You know, on a small lot, if they're going to put an enclosure on a pool, they probably won't have room for a storage shed. So they're going to have to live without that. And that's, you know, that is certainly understood, and it was certainly part of the discussions that I was part of in putting together this CTA, that's a very important limit on how much stuff can be on a lot. If I may, at risk of treading on someone else's territory, I think you might want to think twice about whether you want to put something in the zoning code that says it has to meet the development standards, because that could create an implication that other things in the zoning code that are allowed don't have to meet the development standards, and you don't want to have to start putting that in, like, all over the zoning code.
All I'm saying is we should say that in the comments, because instead of
Yep.
sitting here and trying to go through the entire zoning code and figuring out whether height, setback, lot coverage, impervious cover, et cetera, like, we don't, that's not a productive exercise. So I'm not suggesting that we should propose that we write words in the code that says subject to the other, standards of the zone. I'm just saying the comments, for purposes of communicating our thoughts to the council, should say, we haven't drilled down on this in all the particulars, and I think staff will do that between now and the time we get to the council, but we would just want to say, hey, this seems fine to us as long as it doesn't blow up the, other standards in the code. How's that?
I think that's fine. Maybe I just need some clarification here. So, putting aside this particular scenario that started this conversation, but retractable pool covers, the ones that you showed us, is that a structure at that point? Because it's retractable, and it is not it doesn't have four sides and pillars and a roof or anything like that. It retracts over. Is that going to count towards lot coverage?
In my past experiences at DPS, no, it was not, because it was a retractable, it was a temporary structure.
Okay.
This is not, it's basically, there's an option, and it's kind of not in my wheelhouse, but in the building code section under pools, it talks about you got to have protection, whether it's a fence or a pool cover.
Sure.
So it's a temporary measure that retracts and is not permanently fixed.
So that would not be considered.
So therefore, it's not actually a building, it's not actually a structure, it didn't need a building permit.
I sure wish you were at DPS when they were trying to get their permit.
But this is not.
But one benefit to the ZTA is you don't have to get into, issues with is it retractable or is it not. Otherwise, you could have a retractable cover you never retract in order to get around the prohibition. So I think this kind of, what I'm suggesting makes this principled, straightforward. And if somebody wants to apply it to greenhouses, I think that would be actually pretty innocuous, or whatever other accessory thing they want to do in a structure, and it doesn't compromise any of the other objectives of the zoning code.
Well, one of the things that is the difference is if can be occupied by humans. So once it becomes an occupied space, so a pool cover that's flat, there aren't humans there. When you start to make the arch, which is probably why they said that's a building, because it can be occupied. So that kicks you into this different area where coverage does cover a building. But it would
Right,
not
but like you
cover
have
just the
basements,
pool.
for example, that are not occupiable spaces because they don't have sufficient ceiling height or whatever, and they're not prohibited under the code. In fact, they're
No, but they're part, right, whether it's
routinely
occupiable
accommodated.
space or not makes a
Right,
difference.
but my point just being that, like, if you move into your swimming pool, you got issues which have nothing to do with whether or not it's a theoretically permissible use. You don't have, you know, heating, cooking, sanitation, you know, I'm not saying nobody would try it. I'm just saying that there would be ample other avenues to enjoin that behavior.
Well, I think that's the reason that I suggested that we look at this for a long-term solution, because, I mean, occupiable is also not clearly defined. And so I still would like that, some follow-through on that, because clearly there are distinctions between.
Yeah, and I think my
that.
proposal is consistent with that, and it keeps us on a track to do something principled with this that is compatible with future arguments about greenhouses and gazebos and whatever. Okay?
Jerry Sushi.
Oh, yeah, Jerry, sorry.
Comment. Yeah, hey, thank you. And I personally enjoy our community pool very well, and I understand the desire for this, and we do have some pools in the community, private pools. The question, is there any other examples around the country, adjacent counties or in the metropolitan area where this is done? A couple questions come up is the scale of it. And again, if you're out there in the middle of the winter, you may not necessarily want to walk back to the house for a toilet facility. So does it kind of grow into something more? Again, storing your floats and other things that you use in the pool, does that become a shed adjacent to it? So I think it needs some scrutiny, something that could proceed, but maybe perhaps a little better definition, electricity to it, as I say, storing water to it, and whether someone might want to additionally add a little room to it or something if you're there, kind of a layover room or something. So those are a lot of questions that come in, but something that it should proceed, and I would support the action of the commissioners.
Okay, so my proposal is recommend approval with the comment that we want to make sure that it is not carving out some new ground as far as other development standards of the zone.
Well, Chair, I'd like to amend what you suggested, that it include the suggestion put forth by Commissioner Rubin. It's interesting, the things that you were going to say, Commissioner Rubin, that you said were what I was going to say. And it's this lack of clarity regarding building versus structure. And I did hear you, Mr. Sartori, as you indicated, there's some impracticality as to how the zoning text amendment exists today. But you also presented to us that we could suggest, and we may do this, the accessory structure grouping, and that we could also talk about what other jurisdictions are doing. So I'm not opposed to moving forward with this. Unfortunately, I know that's your recommendation, is to oppose, but I suggest that we move forward but make recommendations to the county council as put forward by the chair, put forward by Commissioner Rubin. And I'm asking that we do recommend this accessory structure grouping, that we do talk about other jurisdictions, and specifically this building versus structure, even as we heard from, and sir, I don't remember your name, but there's lack of clarity about what becomes a structure, what becomes a building. If I had looked at this and it wasn't translucent, it would remind me of a Quonset hut, which is in many ways a livable structure. But when we see it's translucent and there is a pool, to me, that's not a livable structure. Yes, you can walk around the perimeter, but I don't know about long-term living within that structure. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, so I think it's clear where we're going with this and what types of comments we want to make. I did want to ask if the board was interested in asking the council to clarify the type of pool. And I know I wasn't showing those examples to make light of the situation, but I think even if it just said swimming pool or in-ground pool, concrete, or something along those lines to make it clear.
I agree for this particular purpose, in-ground pool, because it does impact the height and et cetera. So I agree with that.
I concur. And in your presentation, you actually mentioned that there are other jurisdictions that provide specificity regarding what a pool is. May not be the kiddie pool, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning.
Okay. Could we get a motion to approve comments consistent with the discussion that's just been had?
I move for approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's
Jerry
approved.
Sushi, aye.
Thank you, Jerry. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your thoughtful analysis.
Great. See you soon. All right, we're ready for what I think will be the last item of the day. Item 8, 1910 University Boulevard Senior Housing with Emily Titlebaum.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Emily Tettelbaum with the Mid-County Planning Division. I am happy to be here today to present to you 1910 University Boulevard, application numbers conditional use CU 2022-04 and preliminary forest conservation plan CU 2022-04. We recommend approval of conditional use CU 2024 and transmittal of the comments to the hearing examiner, and we recommend approval with conditions of the preliminary conservation plan. The conditional use application is for a 90-unit independent living facility for seniors, and the project is the result of a partnership between a nonprofit affordable housing developer, Mission First, and a local synagogue. The facility would have 90% income restricted units and 30% MPDUs. So here is a map that shows the general vicinity. The property is actually straight down Reedy Avenue here, across Georgia Avenue, where it dead ends right at the property. So this is it right here. It fronts on University Boulevard. And for conditional uses, we delineate the neighborhood to assess the compatibility. So the property is in red here, and the staff-defined neighborhood is in black. And the neighborhood has single-family detached homes in the R60 zone and townhouses in the PD zone. There is the WTOP site is just on the other side of University Boulevard here, and there is a park about a block away down University Boulevard. So the overall synagogue property today is 3.56 acres, and it contains parcel B, which is this parcel here that I'm outlining, where the existing synagogue is located, and then an unplatted parcel here that contains a former house that's now used as a food pantry, surface parking lot, and some play equipment here. The property, as I mentioned earlier, is in the R60 zone. There are two driveways that are currently located on the property. There's one right here that allows ingress to the property, and then the circulation goes around the synagogue here, and the exit is at the other driveway right here. So just to give you a big picture about what's going on, I want to talk about a subdivision of the property, which you're not reviewing as part of this application, but just to give you an overall context of what's going on. If the conditional use is approved, you'll see a subsequent application for the subdivision. But the synagogue property would be subdivided into two lots. So the synagogue would retain one lot for the building, and a portion of the synagogue would be demolished over here where my cursor is to add some additional parking spaces. And then the lot for the independent living building would be here. It's outlined in this darker red color here, and this is the subject of the conditional use application that we're looking at now, just this top portion. And while I have this plan on the screen, I'll just talk about parking briefly because it involves both of these lots. So the applicant is proposing to provide 37 of the parking spaces that are required for the senior living building on the synagogue property with a joint use agreement. And we're very happy about seeing this efficient use of parking between these two uses. You know, we would like to see more properties in the area develop like this because it's a great use of the surface parking spaces here. The senior building lot will have 10 parking spaces, but most of them will be on the adjacent lot. So now for the conditional use proposal here. As I mentioned before, there are 90 units proposed in a building that will be a maximum of 50 feet, and the highest part of the building will be right along University Boulevard. The building is pulled up as far as it can be along University Boulevard, giving the required setback, but it'll create a nice kind of street edge with some green area in front. And the building steps down towards the back of the property and the neighborhood of detached houses on Reedy Drive. You can see here, so the front door of the building is actually here. There's a this driveway, which is in the existing position of the driveway. It's being modified slightly, will allow right in, left in turns, and right only turns. I'll show you a circulation slide in a moment. But the front door to the building is right here. There's a loading space for the property right here, which is just adjacent to the trash room, and as far away as it can be from the neighboring properties. There are also connectivity enhancements provided with the project, including a pedestrian connection. It's a new pedestrian connection between University Boulevard and Reedy Drive. And I'll talk about that a little more in a subsequent slide. This slide shows you the architecture. So this is the view from University Boulevard. The building will actually be 5 stories, but it will look like 4 stories from University because the ground floor is mostly buried due to the topography of the property. The property slopes down from University towards Reedy Drive. This elevation here shows the main entrance facing the synagogue. So here's the front door here. And then this is the elevation from the Reedy Drive neighborhood. So you can see the 3-story portion that's closest to the neighborhood, and then behind there's step backs here to the higher portions of the building. So here is a circulation plan and shows some of the enhancements to the property. So the existing sidewalk along University, which is right next to the curb right now, and otherwise substandard, is going to be pulled back towards the property with a tree panel between the sidewalk and the street. And there'll be an 8-foot wide pedestrian and bicycle connection, as I mentioned earlier, between Reedy Drive and University Boulevard. There was a lot of discussion about this connection with the applicant team because both of the synagogue and the senior housing provider were very concerned about security. And this was ultimately the compromise we came to, balancing the need for a pedestrian and bicycle connection here and the concerns about security. So we've made sure that the area is welcoming and well lit, and will meet the need of people who need to travel between Reedy and University. And as I mentioned before, there will be a joint use parking agreement. They'll be formalized as part of the preliminary plan, allowing the parking to be shared between the uses. The preliminary forest conservation plan is also part of your review today. There's a 0.53 acre afforestation requirement, and the applicant is requesting variance approval to remove or impact 10 protected trees. You can see them here in red. Most of them need to be impacted because of the construction of the proposed building. The applicant will be required to provide 84 caliper inches of mitigation. We do have one additional condition we'd like to add to the conditional use proposal, and this is already something that the applicant was going to do and has agreed to, but we just wanted to make sure it was part of the conditions, that they install signage on the driveway on the conditional use lot prohibiting left turns onto University Boulevard. So with that, the proposed independent living facility conforms to all the requirements and standards needed for approval, and the preliminary forest conservation plan satisfies all the requirements of Chapter 22A. So we recommend approval of the conditional use with the additional condition I just mentioned and transmittal of the board's comments to the hearing examiner and approval of the preliminary forest conservation plan with the conditions in the report.
Ms. Titlebaum, are there any parking spaces under the building at all? Or
No.
Anything planned?
No,
No.
no, all surface parking here.
Maybe you want to ask the applicant about that. Mr. Klein, you have anything to add before we?
Good afternoon. For the record, Jody Klein, attorney with Middle Miller and Canby, offices in Rockville, representing the applicant in this case, with Ms. Sarah Constant with Mission First. We love to brag about our projects, particularly this one that I think is really going to have a real energy effect in Wheaton. But knowing where we are on the agenda, you'd probably like to get out of here today. I'll just reserve our comments to say all the conditions are acceptable to the applicant. Glad to answer any questions. However, John Blauweiss with the synagogue would like to make a comment to you because we are helping them and they are helping us, and he'd like to express his comments about that.
Yes, that would be fine. Go right ahead. Is it Mr. Blauweiss? Am I getting that? Am I close? I think you're muted. Still muted.
John, we can't hear you, sir.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Okay, we hear you now.
Okay, I see you can see me now too.
Yes.
Very good. So my name is John Bleweiss, and I currently serve as president of Congregation Hart Zion Agudas Achim. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here to tell you why our congregation has joined with Mission First and is so proud to be part of their effort to bring affordable senior housing to the Wheaton Silver Spring area. Let me say at the outset that what started for us as a strictly commercial venture quickly became to us a win-win-win situation, which included a win for the Wheaton Silver Spring community and the local Jewish community. I will not repeat what Mission First and Park and Planning staff have reported on the project's benefits, but I will talk to you about what it means to HDAA and how we know it will benefit others. I don't have to tell you about the lack of senior affordable housing. The creation of housing is a primary goal for your agency. But please note that the property is in Wheaton and adjacent to Kemp Mill, which is home of the largest concentration of traditionally observant Jews in the metro area. Yet there is no affordable senior housing available to this community, which requires Jewish resources such as supermarkets and synagogues in close proximity to their homes. So as people age, they must leave the community and the Jewish institutions that are located there. HTAA has already had inquiries from members of this community on how they can apply for an apartment. On an environmental note, our synagogue was started almost 70 years ago. There were far fewer environmental constraints having to do with stormwater management then, and we are aware that our systems are currently not environmentally friendly. It is no urban legend that a stream runs underground very close to our property, the Wheaton Branch. The stream runs into Sligo Creek. Mission First will be upgrading all the stormwater concerns on our property as they build their project. This is a clear benefit for the surrounding community and a watershed that has been targeted by the county for immediate help. Finally, I know that all of us are aware of the new walkway that will be built from Reedy Drive to our property. HTAA has tried to be a good neighbor since the 1950s and has allowed constant access to all of our neighbors through its property. It's a great shortcut for people going to the metro and connecting to the trails leading into Wheaton Regional Park. Sadly, though, in the last few years, we've had to chain off our gate because of the alarming rise in anti-Semitic incidents. We were told to do so by the county police and the National Secure Jewish Network. It's been a problem for us and the entire community, which will now be remedied through the design of the new pedestrian path. Safe and convenient for everyone. Thank you to Mission First and Park and Planning staff. As this project is completed, the members of HTAA look forward to sharing resources and life events with our new neighbors and to be able to continue to serve the larger community as we have since 1955. Thank you very much.
Thank you
That
so much.
completes the applicant's presentation, but for one
Yeah.
sort of side comment, and you may have noticed that on your agenda for early this morning, there was an extension for the preliminary plan for this project, so we'll be back to see you before the end of the year. And I wanted to point that out because Ms. Patterson always says, gee, you really need a fourth extension? But at least now I know I can guarantee we're going to be here before the end of the year and won't need another one, that's
And
for sure.
Mr. Klein, just for the record, I usually ask that question because I'm the one that extends it even further than what you asked for. So I did see it. I was tempted to ask, but when I saw it was your application, I said, he's going to make the deadline.
We're confident we're going to be there in time. Thank you very much. That's all our presentation.
Any other comments or questions or motions?
I just had one comment and one question real quick. Comment, the design's great, and I like how you broke up the facade. I mean, it looks like almost, if you looked at it, almost like townhomes on the side with the different colors, so that's nice. Question for you, is that going to be a green roof? I just saw that on the illustration.
The answer is there are green roofs in the building. In fact, it addresses some of the stormwater management issues. I'm not sure, would you like an explanation on it from the architect or the engineer?
Well, it just, we talk about how expensive they are. This is Wheaton, given this project, the affordability. I think it's just worth.
Mr. Goodman, can you give a quick explanation, Mr. Verma, of what we're doing in terms of on the roof treatment?
Of course. For the record, Michael Goodman with VICA, the civil engineer. We were able to work with the architect to establish some green roof on the building, and you can see in this view they were able to incorporate it with some of the mechanical equipment that also needs to be up there. And with green roof, you still have to supplement it with some other stormwater measures. So we do have some microbiofilters scattered around the building as well.
Thank you so much. That's it for me.
Yes, I think we're all agreed this is an exciting project for all the reasons that have been mentioned. Is there a motion on the preliminary forest conservation plan?
I move approval of the preliminary forest conservation plan with conditions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry Sishi, aye.
Opposed? That is approved unanimously. And the transmittal of the comments to the hearing examiner.
I move approval of transmittal of comments with the additional condition as added by staff in the presentation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry Sishi, aye.
Opposed? That too is approved. We'll see you soon for
Nice project.
yeah, the final piece of the regulatory approvals.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. We're adjourned until 2 o'clock when we have a full commission meeting.